Hi, everybody. Welcome to the second episode of Heritage Storytime. The episode today is called Philly Has a Dream for Martin Luther King Jr. Day. Heritage Storytime is a monthly program, a series of episodes where we read a book about Philadelphia heritage. It's presented by the Global Philadelphia Association, which is where I'm from. My name's Melissa. I'm here today with some friends from History Hunters and the Johnson House. And for all of the teachers that we have with us today, or adults, or anybody who's interested, I just added a bunch of links in the chat for you. We have a resource guide for this episode. We have suggestions for viewing, which has some great questions to think about while you're watching or after you're done watching. And we'll have more on that at the very end of the episode. So today we are going to talk about Dr. Martin Luther King and a very special place in Philadelphia. We're going to learn about people who lived long ago in the past, who fought very bravely for equality. We all live in a better world today because of what they did in the past for all of us. And that is a part of our heritage. So this is called Heritage Storytime. And if you watched the first episode, episode 1, you learned that the word heritage means everything that we've inherited from the past that makes us who we are today. And it's also about who we want to be in the future. So we're going to be thinking a lot about that today. So while you're watching this episode, I want you to think about, what do you want your future to look like? What can you learn from the people that you'll hear about today who fought for equality in the past? And what can you do today to make a better future for everybody? So I'm going to turn it over to my friend Sarah. Sarah, take it away.
For this episode of Heritage Storytime, we're going to hear a portion of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s very important I Have a Dream speech. He gave it in 1963 in Washington, D.C., and about 250,000 people had gathered to listen to him and to be part of the March on Washington. This was at the Lincoln Memorial. This portion is in a book with the same name, I Have a Dream. The illustrator for the book was Kadir Nelson, and the publisher was Random House. You probably already know this, but enslaved Africans lived here in Philadelphia from the 1700s until the 1860s, when slavery was abolished after the Civil War. Did you also know that there were people here in Philadelphia who pushed against slavery and worked to get it abolished? We're going to hear about them a little later on after we hear Miss Jackie read the book with Dr. King's speech. In fact, our city, Philadelphia, has had many, many people, men, women, and children, yes, children too, who have advocated for civil rights for hundreds of years and are even doing so now in 2021. Okay, let's listen to Miss Jackie. She's going to be talking to us from a very special place in Philadelphia that Melissa mentioned, and she's going to tell us about that place too. Take it away, Jackie.
Good morning, everyone, or should I say, Habari Gani. Guess what? Habari Gani is Swahili for what's up, what's happening, what's the news? My name is Miss Jackie, and I'm a docent for a very special place. Oh, I can't tell you just yet. I'll tell you later. And Swahili is a language that is spoken throughout the continent of Africa by many, many people. So, Habari Gani. Today's news is about 2 words and about one very special person. One of the words is advocate. Have you heard that word before? It means someone or a group that speaks or publicly supports a cause or a policy. Can you think of some concerns that people have today that have to do with perhaps homelessness or racial injustice? Now the other word is leader. Does that word sound familiar? Who's the leader in your family? Are you a leader? Well, today, our Habari Gani News will be about someone who was both an advocate and a leader. I will be reading about something he gave to people on a very special day, 1963, because his gift to millions of people have meaning right this minute. He gave that gift at a special place too called the Lincoln Memorial. His birthday is coming up next week. Can you guess who this advocate and leader might be? Well, that very special advocate and leader is Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He was an advocate for justice of all kinds, but especially racial and economic justice for Black people and for everyone. His being an advocate led to his becoming an important leader of the civil rights movement in the 1950s and the 1960s. Now follow me as I read from one of his most significant speeches with the message of justice and freedom. Later, we will learn more about a very special place, this place where I am, where there was a family of advocates and leaders who lived a long time ago in a very special house, this house right here. And today, that house, built a long, long time ago, continues the work of that family of advocates and leaders through its Center for Social Advocacy. So, now I'm going to begin to read about one of Dr. King's famous speeches from this beautiful, beautiful book. It's titled, I Have a Dream. The author is Dr. King, but the beautiful paintings are by Kadir Nelson. Isn't that beautiful? Beautiful pages. So I have a dream. I say to you today, my friends, that even though we face the difficulties of today and tomorrow, I still have a dream. It is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed or its beliefs, that we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream that one day, even the state of Mississippi, a state sweltering with the heat of injustice, sweltering with the heat of oppression, will be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day little Black boys and Black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers. I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day every valley shall be exalted and every hill and mountain shall be made low. The rough places will be made plain and the crooked places will be made straight. And the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together. This is our hope. This is the faith that I go back to the South with. With this faith, we will be able to hew out of the mountain of despair a stone of hope. With this faith, we will be able to transform the jangling discords of our nation into a beautiful symphony of brotherhood. With this faith, we will be able to work together, to pray together, to struggle together, to go to jail together, to stand up for freedom together, knowing that we will be free one day. This will be the day when all of God's children will be able to sing with new meaning. My country, 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. Land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrim's pride, from every mountainside, let freedom ring. And if America is to be a great nation, this must become true. So, let freedom ring from the curvaceous slopes of California. But not only that, let freedom ring from Stone Mountain of Georgia. Let freedom ring from Lookout Mountain of Tennessee. Let freedom ring from every hill and molehill of Mississippi. From every mountainside, let freedom ring. And when this happens, when we allow freedom to ring, when we let it ring from every village and every hamlet, from every state and every city, we will be able to speed up that day when all of God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the words of that old Negro spiritual. Free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we are free at last. The words of Dr. King from this beautiful book, I Have a Dream. Okay, no more suspense. The very place where this family lived, worked, prayed, and oh yes, advocated to end enslavement of African people is called the Johnson House Historic Site. And this is just one of the rooms of this very, very special house. It is located in a very historic part of Philadelphia called Germantown. The Johnson family had means, which meant they were able to take care of themselves. Why? Because they were farmers and tanners and they owned land, about 300 acres. And that special house, this house, was built in 1768. Yes, it was a very long time ago. And it housed a number of generations, but it was the second generation of the 1840s, the 1850s, and the 1860s, where those two words, advocate and leader, took root and became very real. The second generation of Johnsons were known as abolitionists. They fought against slavery. But these were dangerous times, those 1840s, 50s, and 60s. It was the era or period of the enslavement of African people. Taken from their homeland in Africa, brought to work under brutal conditions, many enslaved Africans resisted being enslaved by running away. But there were policies and laws that were created to punish them for running away. And if anyone decided to help, by feeding them, by hiding them, or even teaching any Africans to read or write. But brave advocates and leaders like the Johnson House family A family who practiced their faith as Quakers or as members of the Religious Society of Friends resisted being intimidated by those policies and laws. They thought these laws were just plain unjust, and they were willing to take the penalty if they were caught. One of the reasons the Johnsons were so courageous is that they were not only Quakers, but they were called Hicksite Quakers. Now that's a sect or a group of Quakers who 100% said slavery was wrong. Dr. King's words, which we have heard today, the virtual tour of this house, this very special house, the Johnson House, which you're going to experience in a few minutes, have meaning today just as it did hundreds of years ago. We still have much work to do to make freedom, justice, and equality a genuine, a real reality. So, let freedom ring. Next up, a wonderful tour of this special house where advocates and leaders took a stand for social justice. Habari Gani!
Hello, everyone. My name is Rachel Korma, and I'm the program coordinator for the History Hunters Youth Reporter program, which is a fully subsidized literacy-based field trip program for 4th and 5th grade school children in Philadelphia that takes students to 5 historic sites in Germantown: Stenton, Cliveden, LaSalle University Art Museum, Johnson House, and Wick. This year, as schools went virtual, so did History Hunters. We created an online curriculum accompanied by virtual reality tours of each historic site. If you're interested in participating in the virtual program, my contact information is on the resource guide and on the History Hunters website. Today, in connection with this episode's theme, we're going to share a segment of the Johnson House virtual tour. You can access the full tour on the resource guide for this episode. The tour was filmed using a 360-degree camera, so when you watch on your own, you can click and drag the video around to look all over the rooms as if you were really inside the Johnson House. For today's segment, I will move the video around for you. As Miss Jackie explained, the Johnson House was a station on the Underground Railroad. So now let us travel back in time to the 1840s, 50s, and 60s to learn about the Underground Railroad and the abolitionist leaders right here in Philadelphia who, like Dr. King, advocated for racial justice.
This room looks a little different than it did when this house was first built. There haven't been many changes made to this house. It looks like it did in 1768, except this room used to be 2 smaller rooms. Maybe you can see where there used to be a wall between them, and it was opened up to make it into one big room so it can be used as a meeting room. The people who used this room wanted to stop slavery in the United States, and they could be any religion, race, or background. Do you know what they were called? They were called abolitionists, and the particular group that met here called themselves the Anti-Slavery Society. They used this room for their meetings, where they talked about how to help people who came not only to this house, but also on the entire network of the Underground Railroad. People met here often and talked about how to raise money, because that was needed. When people were traveling the routes of the Underground Railroad, they needed money for food and clothing, and they needed to have information. The people who met here were also all different ages. They were young people, sometimes even younger than you. They would practice the alphabet and make poems about abolition and helping people. They were people of different colors. There were men and women. This was a time when men and women usually met in different rooms if there were meetings going on. But here, everyone was together and all with the common goal of permanently ending slavery. If you look around the room over the fireplace, you'll see a painted portrait of a man named Israel Johnson. Israel was an abolitionist. He formed something called the Free Produce Society, which was a boycott of anything that had been made or grown when workers weren't paid. He was the son of the woman in the picture across the room. That's also a portrait. but it is a photograph. Her name is Jeanette Rowland Johnson, and she was the mother of Israel and 11 other children, many of whom were abolitionists when they were adults. It was her idea to use this house as a station stop or a safe house on the Underground Railroad. We don't know how long the Johnsons did this, or how many people came at a time, or the total number of people who were ever here. Jeanette did this because of her Quaker beliefs. If we think back to what we know about Quakers, one of the things that they believe is that everyone is truly equal. But if we go back to the founding of this state of Pennsylvania, when it was a colony, do you remember who the founder was? William Penn. William Penn was a Quaker, but he owned enslaved Africans. It wasn't until later when Quakers said that no one could be a member of the Religious Society of Friends and be a slaveholder. In fact, the very first written protest against slavery was written right here in Germantown, in this neighborhood. It was only signed by 4 Quakers, all white men, but they said that slavery shouldn't be here in Germantown, in Philadelphia, in Pennsylvania, in America. This happened way back in 1688. That's a long time ago. So the Quakers had a history both of owning enslaved Africans and of being against slavery. But by the time Jeanette Johnson lived, there were no Quakers who were slaveholders. Another person who came to this room a lot, who was very important to the Underground Railroad network, was William Still. If you look around, you can see him in the front of the room. William Still was good friends and a colleague of Israel Johnson, and William Still did something almost nobody else did. In fact, he's the reason we know as much as we do about the Underground Railroad in Philadelphia and the United States. William Still kept written records. He tried to interview as many people as he could who traveled on the routes of the Underground Railroad and came to Philadelphia, not just to this house, but anywhere in the Philadelphia area. William Still tried to meet with them and ask them their name, their age, where they had come from, if they had traveled with anyone else, how long it took them to get here, if they knew what route or path they had taken. He wrote descriptions of what they looked like. He kept all this information, even if they traveled further north and made it to Canada or changed their name. He tried to keep track of them and wrote it all down. Why do you think this was dangerous for him to do? There were a lot of laws written, including the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850, which made it against the law for anyone not only to escape, but also to be a helper. So William Still could have gone to jail and paid a fine of $1,000 for every person he helped or met if he had been caught. He had to keep those records very, very safe. So think about where he might hide them. Also, as he talked to people, he put points on a map of the United States because he wanted to see if there were patterns to the routes people traveled. Our map shows the states in gray that were southern states that were known as the slave states, where slavery was allowed by law. The states in blue were the northern states, which had outlawed slavery and were known as the free states, which includes Pennsylvania. You'll notice Pennsylvania and Philadelphia are very close to what were the slave states. So Philadelphia was an extremely important place on the Underground Railroad, and people would try to get to Philadelphia because it was so well organized with lots of ways to get help. A lot of the routes that William Still traced, those red arrows heading north, go along the water. Enslaved Africans seeking their freedom would travel along the water because dogs couldn't smell a human scent if they went in, and they also wouldn't leave any footprints. A lot of the rivers led in a direction north: the Mississippi River, the Missouri River, the Ohio River, and here in the Philadelphia area, the river that separates Pennsylvania from New Jersey is the Delaware River. That was an important route. The Delaware River has other creeks and rivers that empty into it. Find the dot where the Johnson house is on the map, and then you'll see that Wissahickon Creek we talked about outside. The Wissahickon empties into the Schuylkill, which divides Philadelphia kind of down the middle, and the Schuylkill empties into the Big Delaware River. Before the Delaware River goes into the Atlantic Ocean, it goes into the state of Delaware, which was a slave state. So a person could start walking from Delaware, a slave state, walk along the Delaware River, and follow it all the way to the Schuylkill River in Philadelphia, and then follow the Schuylkill River up to the Wissahickon Creek. Walk a couple of miles along the Wissahickon Creek, and guess where they'd end up? Right here at the Johnson House property.
Right. Like I said, you can view the rest of the virtual tour through the resource guide of this episode. And now I'm going to turn it back over to Sarah.
What an exciting episode this has been. We heard part of Dr. King's speech. We toured part of the Johnson House. We heard about history hunters, and we got a chance to think about being leaders and advocates. And we learned that many people in our own city have been important in advocating civil rights for a really long time. We want to thank Miss Jackie and everyone at Johnson House, Rachel Korma, and everyone who worked with history hunters, and the organization called Global Citizen, who has organized many virtual and in-person activities for Martin Luther King Jr. Day coming up next Monday, January 18th. Did you know that the first MLK Day of Service in the United States was created here in Philadelphia? Since 1996, thousands and thousands of Philadelphians have participated in service projects all over the city on this holiday. Even this year, even during the pandemic, there are fun and important activities to do. There's a great deal more information about Dr. King and the ideas in his speech included in the resource guide for this episode of Heritage Storytime, and also on the Learn Philly Heritage website. Check them out. Back to you, Melissa.
Thanks, Sarah. So I added those links that Sarah just mentioned, the resource guide, suggestions for viewing, also the MLK Day of Service link. So if you're interested in a project, you can check those out there. So I want to thank you all for joining us today. And I want you to remember that heritage is not just about what happened in the past, it's about who we are today and what we can do to make a better future for everyone. And we can be inspired by stories like Dr. King and the Johnson family. Dr. King himself was inspired by the abolitionists who fought to end slavery in the United States. Then Dr. King inspired a whole new generation of people to fight for equality during the civil rights movement of the 1960s. Now, every year on Dr. King's birthday, people around the country do projects in order to better their community and fight for a better future on the MLK Day of Service. So I want you to remember what you learned today. I want you to remember what Miss Jackie said when she was talking about what it means to be an advocate and what it means to be a leader. And what I really want you to think about is the fact that anybody can be an advocate and anybody can be a leader. It doesn't matter if you're still a kid, if you're still a student, there are things that you can be doing. You can be an advocate by standing up against bullying and racism. You can be a good leader by being kind and respectful to everyone that you meet, no matter who they are. And you can join others in honoring Dr. King's legacy by doing a service project on Monday for the MLK Day of Service. As a reminder, the link to find out about those projects is in the chat. And then that's pretty much all that we have for you today. I want to thank you again for joining us. And if you enjoyed this episode of Heritage Storytime, in the links in chat, you'll see learnphillyheritage.org/stories. That will have this episode posted up probably in a few days, but you can also watch the first episode, which tells the story of Oni Judge, who was an enslaved person in Philadelphia who escaped from President George Washington. So you can actually hear her story. If you remember the maps that you saw on the Johnson House tour, you can see exactly how she went up following some of those same routes. So that story is available on that website. And then next month, we'll have a new Heritage Storytime episode for you. That will be on February 11th, and it's going to be presented in both Spanish and English. And for that episode, we're going to be a lot more active. We're going to have you get up, get moving, and play. So we encourage you to join us. Check that website that I mentioned for announcements about this episode that I just mentioned and all future episodes. And I want to thank you all for joining us today. I hope that you'll be able to join us all on Monday on Martin Luther King Day of Service doing projects. And we hope that you'll join us next month for the next episode. Thank you all for coming. Have a great day.